The wind carried the scent of salt and sun-warmed sand as Isla Moreau stepped off the wooden dock, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon where the ocean met the sky in a seamless embrace. The familiar hum of seagulls and the rhythmic crashing of waves against the cliffs brought a wave of memories rushing back, memories she had spent 5 years trying to forget. She had sworn she would never return to Saint-Lunaire, the quiet coastal town where she had once believed love could last forever. But life had a way of bringing people back to the places they had left unfinished. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag as she made her way toward the small bed and breakfast nestled between the dunes. Everything looked the same, the narrow streets lined with blue-shuttered houses, the cafe where she used to sit and write for hours, the lighthouse standing tall against the sky like an old guardian of secrets. And yet, she knew everything had changed. She had changed. Isla's heart pounded as she passed by the marina, her steps faltering when she caught sight of a figure standing near one of the boats. Even from a distance, she knew. Theo Laurent. The name alone sent a tremor through her chest. He stood with effortless grace, his back turned to her, his hands working on the ropes of his sailboat as if the years had not altered the rhythm of his life. His sun-kissed hair was slightly longer now, his frame leaner, stronger, but the way he moved, the quiet intensity of him that had not changed at all. Isla's breath caught as she remembered the last time she had seen him. The storm raging outside, the rain-soaked dock, the sound of his voice breaking as he begged her to stay. And the way she had walked away, leaving nothing behind except the ghost of a promise she had been too afraid to keep. Now, as she stood frozen on the shore, watching him exist in a world she no longer belonged to, she wondered if he had finally let her go. Or if, like the ocean, some things were destined to return. The salty breeze wrapped around Isla, carrying whispers of the past, the ones she had spent years trying to silence. Theo stood near his sailboat, his movements fluid and sure as he secured the ropes, checking each knot with the same precision he always had. The familiarity of him, made her chest tighten. She should have kept walking. Should have gone straight to the bed and breakfast, unpacked, and pretended that the past did not exist in the lines of this town, in the salt on her skin, in the waves that kissed the shore with the same persistence as old memories. But she didn't. Her feet moved before she could stop them, carrying her across the dock, each step closing the distance between them. Theo must have sensed her, because he stilled, his fingers pausing on the rope. The space between them collapsed into silence, stretching and pulling, filled with all the words they had left unsaid. When he finally turned, Isla's breath caught. The years had changed him, sculpting his features into something sharper, more defined, but his eyes, those stormy blue eyes, held the same depth she had once drowned in. For a fleeting second, something flickered across his face, recognition, surprise, something she couldn't name. But just as quickly, his expression hardened, his features smoothing into quiet indifference. Isla's pulse stumbled. She had expected this. Expected anger, resentment, or worse, nothing at all. Because she had left without a goodbye. Because she had never come back. Until now. A gust of wind rippled through the dock, stirring loose strands of Isla's hair, carrying the scent of sea and time between them. Theo didn't speak, didn't move. And for the first time in 5 years, Isla realized she was the one waiting. Waiting for him to say something, to break the silence, to acknowledge that once they had been everything to each other. But he didn't. Instead, after a long, measured breath, Theo turned away, just as she had all those years ago. And this time, Isla was the one left standing in the storm. The weight of Theo's silence settled into Isla's chest like an anchor, heavy and unyielding. She had imagined this moment so many times, what she would say, how she would explain. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of being a stranger to him. The wind stirred the waves, their endless motion reflecting the chaos inside her. She remained on the dock, watching as Theo moved about his boat with the same quiet precision as before, as if her presence was nothing more than a passing current, something to be ignored. But she knew better. The slight tension in his shoulders, the way his fingers gripped the ropes a little too tightly, he was holding back. Just as she had, for 5 long years. The past was not something they could outrun. It lived in this place, in the scent of salt and sun-warmed wood, in the rhythm of the tides that had once rocked them to sleep on lazy summer afternoons. It lived in Theo's hands, the same ones that had once traced promises along her skin, and in her heartbeat, which still stumbled at the sight of him. And yet, they stood on opposite shores, separated by a silence neither knew how to break. Isla's fingers curled at her sides. She had come back for a reason, not just for the town, not just for closure, but for the truth she had spent years avoiding. That leaving him had been the worst mistake of her life. She had convinced herself it was necessary. That love like theirs was too much, too consuming, too impossible to hold on to. But time had only proven one thing. Letting go had not made her free. It had only left her adrift, lost in a sea of regret. Theo adjusted the sail, his movements careful, methodical. She had once loved watching him like this, completely at home with the ocean, his body moving in sync with the waves. Now, she was the disruption. The storm that had returned after years of calm. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to take a step closer. Theo. His shoulders tensed, but he didn't turn. The wind carried her name back to her, as if the sea itself was reluctant to let it reach him. She took another step. Please. Theo finally stilled. His hands rested against the mast, his head tilted slightly as if listening to a distant sound. Then, after a long pause, he exhaled, a slow, steady breath that sounded a lot like surrender. Without looking at her, he spoke. Why did you come back, Isla? Her pulse hammered. Because this time, she wasn't going to run. Because she had spent 5 years waiting for this moment. And because the answer was simple. She had come back for him. The wind carried Theo's words between them, soft yet unyielding, as steady as the tides that had shaped their lives. Why did you come back, Isla? The question settled into her chest, heavier than the years that had passed between them. She had spent so long running from him, from this place, from the depth of what they had been. But standing here now, watching the way his fingers curled around the ropes of his boat, the tension in his posture, the quiet war behind his unreadable gaze, she saw the truth. Theo had not forgotten her. Not in the way she had feared. Not in the way that would have made this easier. The ocean stretched behind him, vast and endless, and for a moment, Isla imagined what it would feel like to step forward instead of retreating. So she did. Slowly, cautiously, she closed the distance between them until she could feel the warmth of his presence, the nearness of the past pressing against her skin. I left because I was scared, she admitted, the words barely a whisper. Theo's breath hitched, but he didn't turn. I thought. Isla swallowed, her voice trembling. I thought if I stayed, I would lose myself in you. That love like ours was too much, too dangerous. A bitter laugh escaped Theo's lips, quiet and sharp, cutting through the night air. And was it too much? Too overwhelming? Too dangerous? No, she whispered. It was the only thing that ever felt real. The confession hung between them, stretching across the time they had lost, across the nights Isla had spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if he still thought of her the way she thought of him. Theo finally turned. The flickering light from the dock cast shadows across his face, but Isla could still see it, the storm in his eyes, the remnants of the love they had left behind. She had spent years convincing herself that walking away had been the right choice. But love was not something to be left behind. Not when it was real. Not when it was him. Theo studied her for a long moment, his gaze searching, his chest rising and falling with slow, measured breaths. Then, just when Isla thought he would step back, he did the opposite. He reached for her. His fingers brushed against hers, hesitant, familiar, as if he was trying to remember the way they used to fit together. A shiver ran through Isla as she exhaled, her fingers tightening around his. And just like that, the distance between them disappeared. The past no longer mattered. The years, the pain, The choices that had led them here, they had all been leading to this moment. Theo's voice was quieter now, rough with emotion. "Are you staying?" Isla blinked back the tears that had gathered in her eyes, nodding slowly. "I'm staying." Theo's breath shuddered, his fingers tightening around hers like an anchor, like a promise, like the tides that would always bring them back to each other. And this time, she would not let go.